The first morning I woke up in my own house, I stayed in bed for 20 minutes, just listening to nothing. Not silence exactly, there were birds outside the window, and the old oak tree in the backyard made a sound when the wind moved through it, something between a creak and a sigh. But there was no one else's alarm going off in another room. No one demanding I make coffee before I had even opened my eyes. No one asking where their things were, as if I had been hired to keep track of everyone's things. It was just me, and the birds, and that oak tree, and the kind of stillness that I had been chasing for most of my adult life. I was 37 years old when I closed on that house. A 3-bedroom craftsman on a quiet street in Asheville, North Carolina. Dark green shutters. A wraparound porch. A backyard with a garden that needed work, and a detached garage that smelled like old wood and machine oil. I had been a pediatric nurse for 11 years, and I had saved carefully and lived small and declined vacations and brought lunch to work almost every single day for 6 years straight. I did not tell many people when I finally signed the papers. My 2 closest friends knew. My coworker Dana knew. I told my mother in a short phone call because I knew she would find out eventually, and the conversation would be worse if she heard it from someone else first. That was my first mistake, not buying the house, telling my mother. She did not say congratulations. What she said was, "Oh, that's nice. How many bedrooms?" And I heard the way she asked it. I had heard that tone my entire life. It was the tone she used when she was already doing math. My family had always operated this way. My mother was the center, and everything orbited around her, including her children, including me. My older brother had been her favorite since before I could remember, and my younger sister had learned early that the easiest way to survive our household was to agree with everything and ask for things sideways, through my mother, never directly. I was the one who pushed back. I was the one who got labeled difficult. By the time I was in my late 20s, I understood that in my family, having boundaries was considered a character flaw. Having your own money, your own plans, your own life that did not include everyone else was treated like a kind of betrayal. I had spent years in therapy learning to name what that was. I had spent more years learning to stop apologizing for existing. But I want to be honest about something, because I think it matters. Even after all that work, even after all those years of therapy and hard conversations and distance, I still flinched when my mother called. There is something they do not always tell you in the self-help books, which is that knowing what something is does not always stop it from working on you. My mother's voice could still make my stomach tighten, not because I was weak, because I had been trained. That training started before I had language for it. So when she called me on a Wednesday evening, 3 weeks after I moved in, I already felt it before she said a word. "Your brother has been going through a hard time," she said. She said it the way someone says the weather is bad. Matter of fact. Not asking me anything yet. Just laying it down. I knew about my brother's hard time. He had lost his job 8 months earlier, which had something to do with showing up late too often and something else that was never quite explained. He and his wife had been staying with my mother. They had 2 kids. The arrangement had apparently been fine for a while, and was apparently no longer fine. "He needs somewhere to reset," my mother said. "Somewhere peaceful, away from the city." I did not say anything. "Your new place has 3 bedrooms, she said. There it was. "I'm settled in, Mom. I'm using all the rooms." "You're one person, Claire. I'm aware of that. Your brother has a family. They just need a few weeks, maybe a month. You could stay somewhere else or just give them the master. You don't need all that space to yourself." I want to be precise about what I said next, because later my mother would describe this conversation differently, and I need the record to be clear. I did not say yes. I did not say of course or sure or we'll figure it out. What I said was, "I'll think about it," which in my family had always meant yes, but which I said knowing that I was buying time, because I had already decided the answer was no, and I needed a few days to prepare for what that no was going to cost me. What I did not know yet was that my mother had already decided my answer for me. I found out from Dana, of all people. She had seen something on my brother's wife's social media, a post about an upcoming family reset trip with a photo of mountains in the background and a caption about fresh air and healing and God's timing. My brother's wife had tagged it with the name of my neighborhood. I sat with that for a moment. Then I called my mother back. "You already told them," I said. She did not deny it. "I told them you were considering it. I didn't think you would actually say no to your own family." "I didn't say yes." "You didn't say no either." I said, "I'll think about it." "That is not a yes. Claire, they need this. I need this. I bought this house so I could have somewhere that was mine. Everything doesn't have to be yours, Claire. That's always been your problem. You hold everything so tightly." I did not respond to that. I had learned, slowly, and at some cost, that certain arguments were not winnable and were not meant to be won. They were meant to exhaust you until you gave in. So I said, Mom, they cannot come here. I'm not offering my house as a place for them to stay. I'm telling you that clearly right now. She hung up. I called my brother directly. He did not answer. I sent a text that said, I heard you were planning to come to Asheville. I want to be clear that I have not offered you my house. Please make other arrangements. He read it. He did not respond. What I did next was the thing that made the difference. I called my property's HOA, which for my neighborhood was a small but organized group, and I spoke to a woman named Margaret, who had been managing the neighborhood association for 9 years. I explained the situation. I told her that family members who did not have my permission might attempt to show up and claim they were staying with me. I asked her what my options were. She was brisk and practical and immediately helpful. She told me that the neighborhood had a guest registration policy. Anyone staying overnight in a property was supposed to be registered with a resident's written authorization. She told me the front gate required a code that I could change. She told me that security did daily rounds and that if I gave them a heads up, they would pay attention. I changed the gate code that evening. I emailed Margaret a written statement saying that I had not authorized any guests to my address and that anyone claiming otherwise did not have my permission. I called my attorney, a woman I had hired 2 years earlier to help me with the home purchase, and I told her what was happening. She told me to document everything. I did. I also called my neighbor across the street, an older man named Gerald, who had already introduced himself twice and seemed to know everything that happened on our block. I told him I might have family showing up uninvited. He nodded like this was not a surprising piece of information about human beings and said he would keep an eye out. 5 days after my conversation with my mother, a Saturday morning in October, Gerald knocked on my door at 8:45. You've got company coming, he said. Saw a minivan and an SUV turn onto the street. Plates from Georgia. I thanked him. I did not go outside. I went to the front window and I watched from behind the curtain. My brother's minivan parked in front of my house, the SUV behind it. My brother got out first. His wife, their 2 kids. And then from the SUV, my mother, my aunt, my cousin Rachel, Rachel's boyfriend, and 2 people I did not immediately recognize but who were clearly part of whatever this was. 8 people total. They had luggage. Real luggage. Not overnight bags. The kind of luggage you bring when you are planning to stay somewhere for a while. My brother walked up to the porch and rang the bell. I did not answer. He rang it again. Then he knocked. Claire. He said it through the door. We drove 4 hours. Come on. I picked up my phone and I called Margaret at the HOA. She answered on the second ring. I told her they were here. She said she was sending security. My brother knocked again. My mother had come up onto the porch now. I could hear her voice, lower, saying something to my brother that I could not make out. My brother's wife had her arms crossed. The kids were sitting on the porch steps looking at their tablets. My aunt was standing by the minivan, looking at the house with the expression of someone evaluating a hotel. The security officer, a man named Rick, who I had spoken to twice before, pulled up in his golf cart about 10 minutes later. He was unhurried. He walked up to the porch. Are you residents here? He asked. My brother said they were visiting his sister. Is the resident expecting you? My brother said it was a family thing. Sir, I need to know if the resident of this property is expecting you and has authorized your visit. There was a pause. Then my brother said, yes. Rick walked up to the door and knocked. I opened it. Ma'am, do you know these people? Yes. They are my family. I did not invite them, and I have not authorized their visit. My brother's face changed. Claire, what are you doing? I told you not to come. I sent you a text. You read it. Mom is standing on my porch without my permission. My mother stepped forward. Claire, you are embarrassing this family. You drove 4 hours to a house you were told you couldn't come to. I'm not the one who created this situation. Rick was quiet and still in the way that people who deal with conflict professionally learn to be. He waited until there was a pause, and then he said, Ma'am, does this property have a guest registration? I told him it did. I told him I had filed a statement with Margaret 5 days ago saying I had not authorized any guests. Then I'm going to need to ask your visitors to leave the property, Rick said. He said it to my brother. Sir, this is private property, and the resident has not given authorization for your visit. I'm going to have to ask you and your group to clear the premises. My mother said, this is her family. You can't keep family out. Rick said, Ma'am, private property law doesn't have a family exception. My brother turned to me. Do you know how this looks? I don't care how it looks. She's our sister. She owes us. I don't owe anyone a house. His wife made a sound of disgust and walked back toward the minivan. The kids followed without being told, which made me think this was not the first time they had watched their parents get turned away from somewhere. My aunt had already gotten back in the SUV. Rachel and her boyfriend had not even gotten out of the car. My mother stayed on the porch. She looked at me for a long moment with an expression I had seen before, not anger exactly, but something colder, calculation. "You'll regret this," she said. "I hope not," I said. And I meant it, in the way you mean something you know is probably true even while you say the opposite. She left. I went inside. I sat down on my couch. I looked out at the backyard and the oak tree, and I waited for the feeling of relief that I knew was coming. And it came. And underneath it was the other thing that also always came. The grief of having a family that makes you choose between them and yourself over and over until one day you finally stop choosing them and you have to live with what that costs. I thought it was over. I was wrong. 3 days later, I got a call from my attorney. She had received a document someone had filed a claim with the county records office asserting a partial interest in my property. The document cited a supposed verbal agreement in which I had allegedly promised to allow my brother to use the property as a co-occupant in exchange for financial assistance during my home purchase. That was a lie. My brother had not given me any money. I had paid for this house myself. My down payment, my closing costs, my everything. I had 6 years of bank records that showed exactly where every dollar came from, and none of it was from my brother or my mother or anyone in my family. My attorney told me the document had a signature on it, my name, a signature that was not mine. I sat with that for a moment. I said, "Someone forged my signature." She said, "That appears to be the case." I want to tell you what I felt when she said that, because it was not what I expected. It was not rage, although rage came later. What I felt first was something almost like clarity, like a fog that had been around me for years, something I had always half seen but kept hoping was something else had finally lifted. This was who they were. Not just difficult, not just boundary crossing. This was fraud. This was forgery. This was someone deciding that because I would not give them what they wanted, they would take it. My attorney filed a formal objection with the county records office within 24 hours. She submitted my bank records, my original purchase documents, and a sworn affidavit stating that I had not signed the document in question and had not entered into any such agreement. She also filed a report with the county sheriff's office and contacted the title insurance company that had covered my purchase. The title insurer took it seriously. They had their own legal team, and they moved quickly, because a fraudulent property claim is not just my problem, it is their problem too. The investigation took about 6 weeks. In that time, I did not speak to my mother. I did not speak to my brother. My sister called once and said she had heard things were tense and she hoped we could all work it out, which I took to mean she was staying out of it, which honestly was the smartest thing she had ever done in a conflict involving our family. What the investigation found was this. The document had been prepared using a notary stamp that had been obtained fraudulently. The signature was a traced copy of my signature from another document. My mother had a copy of a birthday card I had signed years ago, and the investigator believed that had been used as a reference. My mother's name was on a phone record showing a call to the county records office the day before the document was filed. My brother could not prove he had given me any money because he had not given me any money. My mother was charged with filing a fraudulent property claim and forgery. My brother was questioned and ultimately not charged because the investigators could not establish that he had known about the document before it was filed, though I have my own thoughts about that. My mother hired an attorney. The case went through the system the way these things do, slowly, bureaucratically, without any of the drama of television. She eventually accepted a plea agreement, probation, a fine, a permanent record. I was told this in a phone call from my attorney on a Tuesday morning in February. I was sitting in the break room at the hospital where I work, eating the same turkey sandwich I had been eating for 11 years, and I hung up the phone, and I looked out the window at the parking lot, and I did not feel triumphant. I want to be honest about that too. There is a version of this story where the ending is satisfying in a clean way, where the bad people get what they deserve, and the good person goes home to her beautiful house, and everything is resolved. That is not quite how it felt. What I felt was tired. Tired in the way you feel, after something has finally ended that you did not realize had been going on your entire life. My mother was not just someone who had tried to take my house. She was someone who had been trying to take things from me since I was a child. My autonomy, my sense of what I was worth, my right to say no and have that mean something. The house was just the most recent version of an argument that had started long before I was old enough to understand what the argument was about. I did not call her. I did not reach out. She has not reached out to me either, and I do not know if she will. What I know is this. It is late spring now, and the garden in my backyard that I said needed work has been my project on weekends. And it turns out I am better at this than I expected. I have planted tomatoes and basil and one rose bush that a woman at the nursery told me would come back harder every year, that the more you cut it back, the stronger it grew in the spring. I thought about that for a while after she said it. My brother sent an email in March. He said he thought things had gotten out of hand. He said he hoped I was doing well. He said the kids asked about me. I read it twice and I did not respond because I was not sure what I would say that would be true and also kind, and I had decided that if I could not do both, I would do neither for now. Gerald from across the street has become something like a friend. He brings me vegetables from his own garden sometimes and does not ask too many questions, which I have come to understand is a form of respect. Rick, the security officer, nods at me when he passes on his rounds. Margaret at the HOA sent me a card in December that just said, "Glad you're settled in." I put it on the refrigerator. The oak tree in my backyard makes that sound in the wind, between a creak and a sigh. In the mornings when I have a day off, I sit on the back porch with coffee before the neighborhood wakes up, and it is quiet in the way I always wanted quiet. To be not empty, but mine. Just mine. Nobody else's name is on this deed except my own. Nobody has a claim to this porch, or this yard, or this particular stillness before 8 in the morning. I earned this. Not just the money, though I earned that too. I earned this by learning, slowly and at real cost, that the people who love you do not ask you to disappear so that they can be comfortable. That love does not come with a bill. That you are allowed to have a room, an actual room, not a metaphor that belongs only to you, and you do not owe anyone an explanation for wanting that. I learned it late. I wish I had learned it sooner. But I am sitting here on this porch in the early morning, and the rose bush is coming back for the second year now, and it is growing exactly the way the woman at the nursery said it would, harder, stronger, because it was cut back and survived it. That feels like enough. More than enough. It feels like the beginning of something I do not have a word for yet, but that I recognize. It is the feeling of being exactly where you chose to be, with no one else's hand on the door.